Black cleaner answers a foreign call, and ends up saving the billionaire CEO's biggest client. The story I'm about to tell you is called, Black Cleaner Answers a Foreign Call, and Ends Up Saving the Billionaire CEO's Biggest Client, and it begins with a woman everyone saw but nobody really noticed. Her name was Marlene Jackson, 62 years old, working the night shift at Morrison Industries headquarters in Chicago. She had been cleaning these offices for 11 years, arriving every night at 10 o'clock sharp with her cleaning cart, her worn blue uniform, and hands that told stories of hard work that most people couldn't imagine. Marlene wasn't the kind of person who made noise about her struggles or complained about the cards life had dealt her. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that came from raising 4 children on her own after her husband passed away from cancer when she was only 38. Every night, she rode 3 buses to get to work, spending an hour and 45 minutes each way, but she never missed a shift, not once in 11 years. The building she cleaned was 47 stories of glass and steel that pierced the Chicago skyline like a monument to wealth and power, but to Marlene, it was just the place where she earned her living, mopping floors that cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. Morrison Industries was one of those companies that made headlines in financial newspapers, the kind where billion-dollar deals were discussed over morning coffee like regular people discuss the weather. The CEO, Jonathan Morrison, was the grandson of the company's founder, a man in his late 40s who wore suits that cost more than Marlene made in 3 months. She had seen him maybe a dozen times in all her years there, always surrounded by assistants and executives, always moving with purpose, never once making eye contact with the cleaning staff. That was the way things worked. In this building, there were the people who made decisions and the people who cleaned up after them, and the two worlds rarely touched. Marlene understood this unspoken rule and kept to herself, doing her job with the same careful attention she had given it since day one. She knew which executives left coffee stains on their desks, which ones ate at their computers leaving crumbs everywhere, and which ones worked so late that sometimes she would find them asleep on their office couches when she arrived. She knew their habits, their patterns, even caught snippets of their phone conversations, but she was like a ghost moving through their world, present but unseen. On this particular Tuesday night in November, the building felt different somehow. Maybe it was the way the wind howled against the windows on the 39th floor where the executive offices were located, or maybe it was the strange stillness that seemed to hang in the air like something waiting to happen. Marlene had started her shift the way she always did, checking her supply cart, making sure she had fresh trash bags, cleaning solutions, and a special glass cleaner for the floor-to-ceiling windows that gave the executives their panoramic views of the city. She worked methodically through the lower executive offices first, saving the CEO's suite for last because it required extra attention. Everything had to be perfect in Morrison's office. As she pushed her cart down the marble hallway, the wheels squeaking slightly in the silence, she noticed that more lights were on than usual. Papers were scattered across several desks, white boards filled with numbers and charts that meant nothing to her but clearly meant everything to the people who had written them. Something big was happening, she could feel it in the air, that electric tension that came before major announcements or deals. But it wasn't her business to know or care about these things. Her business was making sure every surface gleamed, every trash bin was empty, and every office looked like it had been untouched by human hands. When she reached Morrison's office, she used her master key to unlock the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The office was enormous, bigger than her entire apartment, with a massive oak desk positioned to face the windows that offered a view of the city lights twinkling like stars below. The walls were lined with awards, photographs of Morrison with presidents and celebrities, and expensive artwork that she was always careful not to touch. She began her routine, starting with emptying the trash, then moving to dust the surfaces, being extra careful around the computer and the papers that were always precisely arranged on the desk. That's when she heard it, a phone ringing. Not the desk phone, but a cell phone, its ringtone cutting through the silence like an alarm. She looked around and saw it on Morrison's desk, the screen lighting up with each ring. The caller ID showed a long string of numbers starting with +81, which she recognized as Japan from years of seeing international shipping labels at her previous job at a warehouse. The phone kept ringing, stopping, then starting again immediately. Whoever was calling was persistent, desperate even. Marlene stood there, her dust cloth in hand, watching the phone light up again and again. It wasn't her place to answer it. She had no business touching Morrison's personal phone. But something about the urgency of those calls made her pause. What if it was an emergency? What if something terrible had happened and they needed to reach Morrison immediately? The phone rang again, and this time she noticed the name on the screen, Takashi Yamamoto, Morrison Industries Tokyo. She had heard that name before, whispered in hallways, mentioned in fragments of conversations she had overheard. Yamamoto was important, very important, something to do with a partnership that Morrison had been working on for years. The phone stopped ringing, and for a moment, Marlene felt relief. She could go back to cleaning, pretend she hadn't seen anything. But then it started again, and this time there was a text message that popped up on the screen, just 2 words that she could see clearly: urgent, disaster. Her heart began to race. She looked at the door, then back at the phone. Every instinct told her to walk away, to mind her own business, to remember her place. But those 2 words kept flashing in her mind. Disaster. Urgent. What if lives were at stake? What if waiting until morning meant catastrophe? She thought about her own life, about times when she had desperately needed someone to answer her call, like when her youngest son had been in a car accident and she couldn't reach anyone at the hospital, or when her mother had fallen and she needed someone, anyone, to help. Sometimes answering a call could change everything. Sometimes staying silent could destroy everything. The phone rang again. This time, Marlene set down her cloth, walked to the desk, and picked up the phone with trembling hands. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she said, "Hello, Mr. Morrison's office." There was a moment of confusion on the other end, then a man's voice, heavily accented but speaking English, burst through with obvious panic. "Where is Morrison? This is Takashi Yamamoto. I must speak with him immediately. Everything is falling apart." Marlene's throat felt dry as she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Morrison isn't here right now, sir. This is the night staff. Is there something I can help you with?" There was a pause, and she could hear rapid conversation in Japanese in the background, voices raised in what sounded like argument or distress. Then Yamamoto came back on the line, his voice strained. "Listen to me very carefully. I don't care who you are. You must get this message to Morrison immediately. The contract we signed, someone has changed the terms in the digital version. My board has discovered this tonight, and they are ready to cancel everything. 20 years of partnership, 3,000 jobs in Japan, a deal worth $8 billion, all of it will be destroyed if Morrison doesn't respond before our emergency board meeting in 6 hours. Marlene's hand tightened on the phone. She didn't understand international business, but she understood desperation, and this man was desperate. "Mr. Yamamoto, can you tell me exactly what was changed? Maybe I can find someone who can help." "The payment terms," Yamamoto said, his voice cracking with stress. "Someone altered them to demand payment within 30 days instead of the agreed 90 days. We cannot meet those terms. It would bankrupt our subsidiary. My board thinks Morrison is trying to force us out, to take over our operations. They are furious, talking about lawyers, talking about public accusations of betrayal. I have known Jonathan Morrison for 15 years. I cannot believe he would do this, but the evidence is there in the contract. Someone in your company has betrayed us both." Marlene looked at the papers on Morrison's desk, her eyes scanning them even though she knew she shouldn't. There, on top, was what looked like a contract with Yamamoto Industries Partnership Agreement, printed at the top. She could see handwritten notes in the margins, and one of them said, "Original terms, 90 days, do not change," with multiple underlines. Her heart pounded as she realized she might be looking at evidence that could save or destroy this deal. "Mr. Yamamoto," she said, surprising herself with how calm her voice sounded, "I'm looking at Mr. Morrison's desk right now, and I can see a contract here with notes that say the payment terms should be 90 days and not to change them. It's in Mr. Morrison's own handwriting. There was silence on the other end, then Yamamoto spoke urgently. You must photograph that immediately. Send it to me. It could be the proof we need that Morrison didn't authorize this change. Marlene hesitated. Taking photos of confidential documents could get her fired immediately, maybe even arrested. But then she thought about those 3,000 jobs Yamamoto had mentioned, families depending on those paychecks, children who needed their parents to have work. She thought about trust between two men who had worked together for 15 years being destroyed by someone's betrayal. I don't know how to send photos to Japan from this phone, she admitted. Can you stay on the line? I can read you exactly what's written here. For the next 10 minutes, Marlene carefully read every note on the contract to Yamamoto, her finger following each line as she pronounced words she didn't fully understand but knew were important. Yamamoto occasionally asked her to repeat something or spell out specific terms. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "This matches exactly what we originally agreed to. Someone else has definitely altered the digital version. But who would do this? And why?" Marlene thought about the conversations she had overheard over the years, the office politics she had witnessed from her invisible position. There was one executive, Richard Brennan, the chief financial officer, who she had heard arguing with Morrison about the Yamamoto deal several times. She remembered specifically because Brennan had been so angry once that he had thrown a coffee mug against the wall, leaving a stain she had spent an hour cleaning. She had heard him say that Morrison was too soft, that they should squeeze their partners harder, extract more profit. Could he have been the one to change the contract? "Mr. Yamamoto," she said slowly, "I'm just the cleaning lady here, but I pay attention. There's been tension about your deal with some of the other executives. Maybe someone thought they were helping by changing those terms, or maybe." She paused, not wanting to accuse anyone without proof, but knowing time was running out. Maybe someone wanted this deal to fail. Yamamoto made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Office politics destroying international partnerships. It's too common, too stupid. Listen to me, what is your name? Marlene hesitated, then said, "Marlene Jackson, sir." "Mrs. Jackson, you may have just saved thousands of jobs and prevented a business war between our companies. I need you to do something else for me. Can you find a way to contact Morrison tonight? Can you wake him up, get him to call me?" Marlene looked at the desk again and saw Morrison's daily planner, old-fashioned and leather-bound. She opened it carefully and found his personal contact information written on the inside cover, including his home phone number and personal cell phone. "I found his numbers," she said. "But sir, I could lose my job for this. I'm not supposed to touch anything on his desk, definitely not supposed to be reading his private information or calling him at home." "Mrs. Jackson," Yamamoto said, his voice serious and steady now, "I understand the risk you're taking. But let me tell you something. If this deal falls through, Morrison Industries will lose its entire Asian market. That's not just money, that's jobs here in Chicago too, maybe hundreds of them. You're not just saving my company, you're saving your own. And if Morrison has any sense, he'll thank you for this, not punish you. Will you make the call?" Marlene closed her eyes, thinking about all the years she had kept her head down, stayed in her lane, never caused trouble. But she also thought about what was right, about the courage it sometimes took to do the right thing even when it could cost you everything. She thought about her grandmother, who had always told her that integrity meant doing the right thing even when nobody was watching, especially when nobody was watching. "I'll call him," she said. "Stay by your phone, Mr. Yamamoto. One way or another, you'll hear from someone soon." She hung up and stared at Morrison's home number, her finger hovering over the phone. It was 11:47 p.m. She was about to wake up a billionaire CEO to tell him about a crisis she had discovered while cleaning his office. Her whole body was shaking as she dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a groggy voice answered, "This better be an emergency." Marlene took a deep breath and said, "Mr. Morrison, this is Marlene Jackson. I clean your office at night. I'm sorry to wake you, but Mr. Yamamoto from Tokyo just called your office phone. Someone has changed your contract terms, and he's about to cancel your entire partnership. You need to call him right now, sir. He said you have less than 6 hours before his board meets." There was complete silence on the other end, and for a moment, Marlene thought he had hung up on her. Then Morrison's voice came through, completely awake now and sharp as a blade. "You said you're the cleaning lady? And you answered my phone?" "Yes, sir," Marlene said, her voice steady despite her fear. "It kept ringing, and I saw it was from Tokyo, and it said urgent. I know I shouldn't have, but, tell me exactly what Yamamoto said," Morrison interrupted. "Every word." Marlene repeated the conversation, including the details about the payment terms being changed from 90 to 30 days, about the board meeting, about the 3,000 jobs at risk. When she finished, Morrison was quiet for a moment, then said, "The contract on my desk, you said you saw my notes about keeping the 90-day terms?" "Yes, sir. It's right here in your handwriting, underlined multiple times." Morrison cursed under his breath, then said, "Mrs. Jackson, you might have just saved my company. I'm getting dressed now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do not leave that office. Do not let anyone else in. And if anyone else calls, you answer it and take detailed messages. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Marlene said, though her legs felt weak. "And Mrs. Jackson?" Morrison added, his voice softer now. "Thank you. What you did took courage. We'll talk more when I get there." The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Marlene sat in one of the leather chairs facing Morrison's desk, her hands folded in her lap, trying to process what had just happened. She had stepped completely out of her world and into something bigger, more complex, more dangerous than anything she had ever dealt with before. She thought about calling her oldest daughter, telling her what was happening, but what would she say? That she might have just saved or destroyed an $8 billion deal? That she had inserted herself into international business negotiations? It sounded insane even to her. The phone rang again, and she answered it immediately. This time it was someone from Morrison's legal team, apparently already alerted and asking for specific contract details. She provided what information she could, reading from the documents on the desk when asked. Then Morrison himself burst through the door, still pulling on his suit jacket, his hair uncombed, his face tight with stress but his eyes sharp and focused. He went straight to his desk, grabbed the contract, and scanned it quickly. Then he looked at Marlene, really looked at her for the first time in 11 years. "Show me exactly what you read to Yamamoto," he said. She stood and pointed out each notation, each comment in the margins. Morrison nodded, then picked up his phone and dialed. "Takashi," he said when the call connected, "It's Jonathan. I just heard. This is not authorized. Someone in my company has betrayed us both, and I will find out who." For the next hour, Marlene watched as Morrison transformed from a sleepy, irritated man into a corporate warrior. He made call after call, waking up executives, demanding answers, piecing together what had happened. She heard him fire Richard Brennan over the phone when it was revealed that the CFO had indeed altered the contract without authorization, thinking he was protecting the company's interests. She watched him coordinate with his legal team to provide evidence to Yamamoto's board that the changes were fraudulent. She saw him save a partnership that had taken 20 years to build and could have been destroyed in a single night. Through it all, she sat quietly, a witness to a world she had only seen the edges of before. When the crisis was finally contained, when Yamamoto had confirmed that his board would honor the original agreement, Morrison slumped in his chair and looked at Marlene again. "You know," he said, "in all my years running this company, I've had Harvard MBAs who couldn't handle a crisis as well as you did tonight. You kept calm, you took initiative, and you provided exactly the information needed. Why haven't we ever talked before?" Marlene smiled slightly. With respect, Mr. Morrison, people like you don't usually talk to people like me. I'm just the cleaning lady. Morrison shook his head. No, you're not just anything. You're an employee of this company who just saved us from disaster. And that's going to change things. Over the next few weeks, Marlene's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Morrison didn't just thank her and move on, he made sure the entire company knew what she had done. He brought her to the next board meeting, introducing her to shocked executives as the person who saved the Yamamoto partnership. He created a new position for her, night operations supervisor, with a salary 3 times what she had been making as a cleaner. But more importantly, he instituted what he called the Marlene Jackson Protocol, a new company policy that required executives to spend 1 day every quarter working alongside the support staff, understanding their perspectives, and learning from their observations. The people who clean our offices, who guard our buildings, who maintain our facilities, Morrison said at the company-wide meeting announcing the changes, they see everything. They hear everything. They understand patterns and problems we miss because we're too focused on spreadsheets and presentations. Marlene Jackson proved that every single person in this company has value, has intelligence, has the potential to contribute to our success. We just have to be willing to see them, to listen to them, to respect them. The reaction was mixed at first. Some executives resented the new protocol, saw it as beneath them to work alongside janitors and security guards. But others embraced it, and surprising insights began to emerge. The night security guard who noticed patterns in after-hours badge access that revealed an embezzlement scheme. The cafeteria worker who suggested a change to lunch scheduling that improved productivity. The mailroom clerk who identified inefficiencies in document handling that saved the company $2 million a year. Marlene became something of a legend in the building, but she remained the same person she had always been, quiet, dignified, observant. She still arrived early for her new role, still paid attention to details others missed, still treated everyone from the newest intern to Morrison himself with the same respectful courtesy. The difference was that now people saw her, really saw her, and understood that wisdom and intelligence don't always come with advanced degrees or expensive suits. 6 months after that night, Takashi Yamamoto visited Chicago to celebrate the successful launch of a new joint venture between his company and Morrison Industries. At the celebration dinner, he asked to meet Marlene personally. When she arrived, dressed in a simple but elegant dress her daughters had helped her pick out, Yamamoto stood and bowed deeply to her. "Mrs. Jackson," he said, "in Japanese culture, we have a saying, the lotus flower grows most beautifully from the deepest and thickest mud. You were overlooked, underestimated, working in the shadows. But when the moment came, you bloomed and showed your true beauty and strength. You didn't just save a business deal. You saved a friendship, saved thousands of jobs, and proved that honor and courage exist at every level of society. I am deeply in your debt." Marlene felt tears in her eyes as she accepted his thanks. She thought about all the nights she had spent invisible in those offices, all the times she had wondered if her life had meaning beyond just surviving day to day. She thought about her children, who were now proud to tell people what their mother had done, and her grandchildren, who looked at her with new eyes, understanding that their grandmother was a hero in her own quiet way. That night changed everything, but in some ways, nothing changed at all. Marlene was still the same woman who had raised 4 children alone, who had worked multiple jobs without complaint, who had maintained her dignity through every hardship. The difference was that the world finally saw what had always been there, an intelligent, observant, courageous woman who had been hiding in plain sight. The title, "Black Cleaner Answers a Foreign Call, and Ends Up Saving the Billionaire CEO's Biggest Client," became a story told in business schools, a reminder that value and wisdom can come from anywhere, from anyone, if we're just willing to look beyond our assumptions and prejudices. Morrison Industries became known as one of the most inclusive, forward-thinking companies in the country, with employee satisfaction and retention rates that were the envy of their competitors. And it all started because one night, a woman who everyone saw but nobody noticed had the courage to answer a phone that wasn't supposed to be her responsibility. The lesson was clear and powerful: never underestimate anyone based on their position, their appearance, or their circumstances. The person cleaning your office might be the one who saves your company. The security guard might notice what your executives miss. The cafeteria worker might have insights that your consultants would charge millions to provide. Every person has value, every person has potential, and every person deserves respect and recognition. Marlene's story spread beyond Morrison Industries, inspiring other companies to reevaluate how they treated their support staff. Some called it the Marlene effect, the recognition that the people who keep our businesses running at the most basic level often have perspectives and insights that are invaluable if we just bother to ask and listen. It challenged the traditional hierarchy of corporate America, suggesting that wisdom doesn't flow only from the top down but can and should flow in all directions. For Marlene herself, the transformation was both dramatic and subtle. Yes, she had a better position and better pay. Yes, she was recognized and respected in ways she had never been before. But at her core, she remained the same person, someone who did the right thing because it was right, not because she expected reward or recognition. She continued to mentor other support staff, helping them find their voices and recognize their own value. She established a scholarship fund for children of night shift workers, understanding firsthand how hard it was to break the cycle of invisibility and poverty. And every night, when she walked through those offices in her new role, she remembered what it felt like to be unseen and made sure that everyone she encountered felt valued and heard. The most powerful moment came a year later at Morrison Industries' annual shareholders meeting. Morrison was presenting the company's record profits, much of which came from the strengthened partnership with Yamamoto Industries. At the end of his presentation, he did something unprecedented. He called Marlene to the stage and said to the assembled shareholders, investors, and media, "This woman saved our company with courage, intelligence, and initiative. She proved that the greatest asset any company has is not its technology, not its patents, not even its partnerships, it's its people, all of its people." The tragedy is not that Marlene Jackson was cleaning our offices for 11 years. The tragedy is that it took a crisis for us to see her true value. How many other Marlene Jacksons do we have in our companies, in our society, whose potential we're wasting because we can't see past our prejudices and assumptions? The standing ovation that followed lasted for 5 minutes, but more importantly, it marked a shift in how business was understood and conducted. The story of the black cleaner who answered a foreign call and ended up saving the billionaire CEO's biggest client became more than just an inspiring anecdote. It became a call to action for companies everywhere to recognize and utilize the full potential of every employee, regardless of their position or background. Years later, when business students studied the case, they focused not just on the crisis management aspects but on the deeper lesson about human potential and the cost of prejudice and classism in business. They learned that the real competitive advantage doesn't come from hiring only from top universities or promoting only those who fit a certain image. It comes from recognizing that intelligence, wisdom, and courage exist at every level of society and creating environments where everyone can contribute their best. Marlene Jackson, who started as an invisible night cleaner, became a symbol of untapped potential, a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes or suits, sometimes they wear cleaning uniforms and push supply carts through empty hallways, waiting for their moment to shine. And when that moment comes, they can change everything, not just for themselves but for everyone around them. The title of this story, Black Cleaner Answers a Foreign Call, and Ends Up Saving the Billionaire CEO's Biggest Client, captures a moment, but the real story is about transformation, how one act of courage can reveal the truth that every person has value, every voice matters, and everyone deserves the chance to be seen, heard, and recognized for who they truly are. In the end, Marlene often reflected on that night, on the decision to pick up that phone. She could have walked away, stayed safe, stayed invisible. But something inside her, something her grandmother had planted there long ago, told her that sometimes we're called to step up, to step out of our comfort zones, to risk everything for what's right. She never regretted answering that call, not just because of how it changed her life, but because of how it changed the lives of so many others. The ripple effects continued for years, support staff being promoted to management positions, companies restructuring to be more inclusive, business schools teaching courses on the hidden assets in your organization. All because one night, one woman decided that a ringing phone deserved an answer, that a crisis deserved attention, even if responding wasn't technically her job. The story ends where it began, with recognition that the people we overlook, the people we walk past without seeing, the people we assume have nothing to offer beyond their assigned tasks, these people might just be the ones who save us when we need it most. They might be the ones who see what we miss, who understand what we overlook, who have the courage to act when action is needed. Marlene Jackson was proof that heroes aren't born, they're revealed by circumstances, and they can come from anywhere, from any background, from any position. All it takes is the opportunity and the courage to answer when called. And sometimes, that call comes in the most unexpected ways, at the most unexpected times, to the most unexpected people. But when it does, everything can change. Everything did change, all because a black cleaner answered a foreign call and ended up saving the billionaire CEO's biggest client.